Good day, everyone. Today we'll be looking at health and hygiene for the upper basic school. So we'll look at the definition of hygiene and also we'll look at the definition of health. So what is health? But before we get to that, let me just inform you about the units we'll be looking at. We have community health and communicable and non-communicable diseases. Let's move on. Our objectives include with looking at it this way. By the end of this unit, we should be able to appreciate the importance of hygiene in the prevention of communicable and non-communicable diseases, demonstrate the ways of preventing community health problems. Health, as we can see, health of an individual is not just the absence of disease, but it also refers to his or her complete physical, mental, and social well-being. Everything must be complete. Hygiene, on the other hand, can be defined as the science and practice of maintaining good health. If you take a look at the pictures at the bottom there, washing our hands, drinking clean, safe water, brushing our teeth, combing our hair, and all the things that will help to maintain good health is what we refer to as hygiene. In grade 7, you will recall we learned about personal cleanliness, the importance of keeping the body clean, ways of keeping the body clean, exercise and rest, eating right or eating the right kinds of food. All of these are very important. And so here is a quick question for you. The most important reason for keeping the fingernails short and clean is to prevent so we have options there. A, to prevent the introduction of germs into the body through the skin of the fingers, introduction of germs into the body through the mouth, cutting of one's skin accidentally, inflicting of injury on others. I'll give you a few seconds to ponder on that. What do you think was your right answer? If we go through, the most important reason for keeping the fingernails short and clean is to prevent the introduction of germs into the body through the mouth. In grade 8, we learned about sanitation, which is simply about providing clean, safe drinking water and keeping the environment clean and tidy. Types of waste, we also looked at solid waste, liquid waste, airborne waste. We also looked at the effects of this waste on our health and on the environment. We also looked at methods of waste disposal. Good health is important in keeping us alive and fit to carry out our daily activities properly. So therefore, in this unit, we will study community health problems and the ways of solving these problems. Personal health refers to the health at the individual level, the health of one individual, whereas community health refers to the health at a larger society. We're looking at everybody's health in the community. So another question for you, it is the individuals living together that make up community. Is that true or false? All right, 3 seconds to think about your answer. Yes, that is true. If we go to the next slide, you will see, as a matter of fact, it is our individual attitudes, our behaviors and actions that add up to influence the general health of the society. So everybody's individual health put together influences that of the society. And likewise, the society influences the health of every individual. Next, we are going to look at major features of community health, which include provision of adequate supply of safe drinking water, proper disposal of sewage and waste, protection from harmful drugs and unsafe food, control of vectors of diseases, control of pests, air hygiene and prevention of air pollution, elimination of other hazards, noise, and radiation. We're going to look at each of these later on in detail. So, some terms that are very, very important for us to look at in describing outbreak of diseases: endemic, epidemic, pandemic, and sporadic. So think about it and which ones you've heard of and which ones you already know of. Because when we go to the next slide, I'll want to see how much we remember from those terms. So we will gradually start from the top to look at each one. Okay, so we can see endemic simply is referring to disease that is prevalent in a community, in an area. It is already present in a community for quite some time. Malaria, as we know, has been with us for generations. So malaria is endemic. Epidemic is when we have large cases of diseases, with a sudden outbreak. It's occurring just suddenly in one locality. A common example for that is cholera. Pandemic is when large areas, including several countries, are affected by a disease at the same time. Example is the very popular coronavirus. And sporadic simply means the disease comes and then after some time it disappears. Common cold is a typical example of that one. So let us move on. So here is a simple question. The outbreak of cholera in a large part of Senegal is an example of, so we have endemic, epidemic, pandemic, and sporadic. Okay, which one was your choice? Since it's only in Senegal, but it was a sudden outbreak, it's not something that is there all the time, so we'll refer to it as an epidemic. So it's an epidemic disease. Okay, the novel coronavirus, aka COVID-19, is an example of a or an. Which of the options there? The right answer there should be, you get it right, should be pandemic, because it's now in several countries. Next, which of the following diseases can be described as sporadic? Remember the definition, sporadic? Is it Ebola, malaria, common cold, or AIDS? If you choose common cold, you're very correct. So we see that many of these diseases are caused by tiny organisms that we call microbes or simply microorganisms. We have thousands of these that are found everywhere, inside our body, outside our body, in the environment. Find them in the homes, workplaces, marketplaces, garages, and so on. And when these organisms get into our bodies, through breathing, eating, or through cuts in the skin, they make us ill. And therefore, although these disease-causing organisms are found around us, certain conditions in our environment are favorable for their growth and spread. So our task here is to identify those favorable conditions that we create, not by design, but just by ignorance or our carelessness in some instances, and what ways can we control or combat those situations so that we don't have problems of health. So each community has its own specific health problems. And some of these may be temporary. It's not there all the time. However, there are some health problems that are both epidemic and endemic. I hope you still recall the definitions. Epidemic, we said, it is sudden outbreak just within one locality. But then endemic, which means it's there all the time. Like I said, malaria is an example. Our great-grandparents, they met it. We also are inheriting malaria. Now, why is it both epidemic and endemic? It is epidemic in the sense because it is widespread. and it is endemic because it's there all the time. So what are health problems? Let us look at our health problems. One is unhygienic waste disposal. So here we have health problems. So among them, very important is unhygienic disposal of waste. Unhygienic waste disposal, very important. It involves all the our actions of just throwing, rubbish anywhere we feel like. If you can see in the picture, people will just go, because sometimes it's very difficult to get rid of your rubbish, so people will just dump them anywhere. That can be a very serious situation, because they create room for microbes, that is those organisms that will cause disease in us, to be growing, to have somewhere to reproduce themselves in large numbers. So that is a serious problem. Also, you recall, talking about unhygienic waste disposal, in grade 8 we mentioned about some of this waste that we have or that we produce from our kitchen and from other domestic environment. We have a lot of waste from burning wood, the remains of vegetables, and plastic, papers, and all these things that we use to wrap our food and other things. At the end of the day, we throw them. Excretory waste, that is feces and the urine that comes from our homes, and the bathroom, or from laundry. When we do these things, we have waste that are being produced from these things. So all these types of waste need to be disposed of properly. So there are some thoughts for us to look at. In which ways are they disposed of in your community? Can you think of specific problems associated with the way in which these wastes are disposed of in your community? As you must have learned, in most communities, household refuse stored in a variety of containers, such as buckets, or sometimes we have some of these bags that empty rice bags. We can use them to store our waste. We have pans, we have cartons, we have other disposable things. Also, we may collect this in large amounts, and then cleansing service, example from the KMC or from the BCC or from Brikama Area Council, will come and then they collect these things and take them to the dump site. They usually result in a situation wherein if these people don't come and collect this waste accumulate in huge amount, and then they become very disturbing in the environment. So this refuse also are collected at marketplaces, garages, and just where people gather. We always have waste that we live in there. So when these are unattended to, when they are not collected in such areas, they accumulate in large amounts, and that becomes a problem for us. So the health problems associated with improper solid refuse disposal. So now, what are the problems we encounter here when we don't dispose of our refuse, the solid waste, liquid waste, airborne waste, and so on? What are the problems we get? One is that it encourages vectors to breed. Encourages vector breeding. In a moment, we'll be talking about the meaning of the term vector, if you already don't know it. During the rainy season, you have empty tins and cans among refuse heaps, and those that we throw, without even thinking about them. So here we're looking at vector, simply mean the organism that is carrying the things that cause disease. If you look at the picture, the organisms you are seeing there, these are vectors. They carry the organisms that cause disease. And so among them, you have like the mosquito, which will also breed very well. We all know about this, and we feel the consequence when mosquitoes breed in large amount, and then they create malaria for us. Also, we have excretory waste disposal. Excretory waste disposal as a problem. Right, it's a serious public health concern in both urban and rural areas. Still, we are looking at health problems. So later we'll have to look at what do we do to control or to manage these health problems. So one we're looking at here now, excretory waste disposals, what problems we have there. One of the most common way our people get rid of waste is to have pit latrines that are open. So we have open pit latrines. In some other places, they have bucket, or they call them pail latrines. I'm not quite sure this is still going on, but it used to be common, especially in some areas wherein buckets are used for collection of feces. And we also have unsanitary waste disposal. Unsanitary waste disposal, often in the form of the liquid water that comes from either the bathroom or from washing clothes and so on. And these things just run into open gutters. And of course, you can see how one problem leads to another. Because when these things go into the gutters and the gutters, they all meet at some place. So you have a large amount of water settling. Of course, like we mentioned before, it helps mosquitoes to breed. So these are all some of the health concerns that we have there. And the sale of unhygienic food is another major problem that we would want to look at. So remember, first we're looking at how do we, let me just put those points here. Waste disposal is the first problem we're looking at. Next, we're looking at sale of food. And in this case, we're looking at foodstuff that is sold in unhygienic condition. A lot of the time you're in the street or you're passing somewhere, you're hungry, you want food, so you look for these food hawkers or food vendors, and there you buy food. But in some instances, the handling of the food might be a problem, or the environment where the food is sold or the containers in which the food is sold could be a huge problem. So what do we do in that instance? We come to number 3. Now we're looking at unsafe drinking water as another health problem. So if we expose ourselves to drinking water that is unhygienic, water that is not clean, and you drink these things, of course, you are simply taking in things that are going to cause disease in your body, and that can be a serious problem. You would also see children particularly, often you see them going into some of this dirty water. They don't know much about this hygiene, and sometimes they even bathe in them and they swim in this dirty water. So imagine a picture like this, a child swimming in water like this. That child is definitely going to take in a lot of microbes. And that can result in a lot of problems, okay? They can expose themselves to diseases like cholera, diarrhea, dysentery, and a lot of diseases that affect the digestive system. And sometimes some people have this practice of when they are washing clothes, they'll just throw the water, especially if they live near streams. So they just throw the dirty water into the stream. Some of us, we use the same stream for drinking, for bathing, and we collect the water and we do our cooking. All of these can be a source of collecting germs. And once the water is contaminated, it becomes a serious problem. So other community health problems will include overcrowded situations. We have poorly ventilated and overcrowded. Poorly ventilated. Ventilated is talking about ventilation, like creating or making your houses such that enough air should be able to flow in. But if you are in overcrowded places, the flow of air becomes very poor, and hence that is a very serious concern for the people that are living there, because they would have some health problems. One more we have is the fact that some people take up bad habits like cigarette smoking. And sometimes even very young children can take up cigarette smoking, and this is of course very bad. In the Gambia, we can see the government have put in place mechanism to ban public smoking. If you must smoke, you have to do it at your private location, no more in public places. But of course, these are some of the major health problems that we encounter. So now that we have identified the problems, we said waste disposal is a serious problem. Sale of foodstuff in unhygienic places is another major problem. Unsafe drinking water, poorly ventilated or overcrowded houses, these are all problems. Children taking up bad habits. So what can we do to solve this? I was even going to ask, is there some other things or some other actions we do that may be placed under this group? Maybe you want to say issues with alcohol drinking, because we have some young people who now take up the habit of drinking alcohol even at early age, and then they become addicted to this alcohol, and that can create some serious problem. What do we do to handle these problems? So ways to solve the community problem. Let us look at that. Ways to solve community problems. Remember earlier on we mentioned that the health of individuals contribute to the health of the community, and likewise the health of the community influences or affects the health of individuals. So if we're solving community problems, we are equally solving problems, health problems for individuals. So one problem we have, one solution is that household members should contribute their own quota in keeping the environment healthy and clean. How do we do that? We control the waste that we produce. Is it solid waste, or is it the liquid waste that we produce, or anything that is coming from us that we don't want? Once they are controlled, then that will make it better for us to improve on our health. And number two, you can see community members should embark on regular cleansing exercises. In the Gambia here, set-settle is very common. So first we'll say one, individuals contribute. Individuals, let's say, do their own bit, like clean your your houses, your environment, your compound. And number two, we're saying you can come as little groups at community level. We can do, community cleanliness. You can come out on set-settle day with your brooms and your buckets and clean the environment, collect all this rubbish and put them safe, clean the gutters. Everywhere that we have rubbish that is going to disturb the environment, we keep all of them out of the place. You can see little children, okay? They're learning at a very early age how to clean the environment. They are a typical example of set-settle. Everybody, all hands on deck. And if we look at the subsequent pictures, okay, again, we can see young people, the youth, actively involved in cleaning the environment. And of course, at the larger scale, the municipalities to do its own part in the streets and so on, so that people can have somewhere to put their rubbish. Sometimes it's not that people just want to keep the environment dirty, but sometimes you don't have where to dispose of your waste. So in creating this type of containers and so on, it makes life easy for people. You have your rubbish. Now we need to inculcate the habit of, when you have your rubbish and you don't have somewhere to dump it, keep it. Like you're in vehicles and so on. And once you reach one of these containers, then you can safely put them there. You can see a photograph of vehicles that, of course, when you have large amount of rubbish, the vehicle can come and pick up. So number 3 says the practice of cleaning the environment on regular basis is very, very important. But what is most important is for us to train ourselves, discipline ourselves so that we don't make the environment dirty. If we don't make it dirty, there is no need to clean it. We need to clean because we make it dirty. Some will be trying to make things neat and tidy while others don't care. Vehicles are passing, people just throw rubbish in the street. We have to train ourselves. And if you're sitting with somebody, perhaps you can gently remind that person, please, we should keep the environment dirty, but be polite so you don't start a quarrel them. So everybody in the environment at every level in the community, if we all stop throwing plastics, we gather them, and the other waste we get from the homes, when you peel fruits or you women cooking, they collect these things, put them in containers, and when this vehicle come and they pick them up, that will help a lot in improving our health condition. We ourselves, try not to litter your environment. That's very, very important. Try not to litter your environment. That will help a lot in keeping the place very clean. And we go, number 4. So hopefully you've got these notes down. And we go up to number 4 that says, public and household pit latrines and buckets should not be near wells. So keep all latrines away from kitchen. They should not be near your kitchens, because this is where you are preparing food. So if they're very close to your kitchens, that means, like we mentioned earlier, microbes can easily come from those areas and then come to your kitchen and then make problem for you. And number 5 is talking about food vendors. Now, what should they do? These people should keep their food items away from flies and dust. How can they do that? Simply, if you have your food and they simply ask you to cover it with plastic, or sometimes people will have boxes, transparent box if you like, and then you enclose the food there to protect the food so that germs and microbes and other things will not go there. So it is also very important to screen people that deal with food, people who sell food. So if somebody is going to sell food and that person is already having some diseases, there is every likelihood that the person will be passing on these diseases through the food to other people. So these are some of the ways we can handle the problems of community health. And it says again, another important aspect there is education, which we can participate in. Okay? If we give education to the larger community and to our neighborhood and to our friends and family, we tell them the importance of keeping the environment healthy and clean, that will help a lot. You can see it says, if people in a community do not know how diseases are spread or how they may be prevented, the standard health of the community will not improve. So these were the few points I put around, and we want you to mention other ways. See if you can mention other ways of maintaining good health in your community? You can think, there should be more. I've just brought like 4 or 5 points, so you can probably add some more there. Okay? So now we want to look at diseases caused by organisms. What diseases that organisms cause? Because when we feel sick, it is because in some instances these diseases are caused by organisms. We have some important terms there, so let us take note of them. One of them is the word pathogen, or simply the organism that causes disease. So when these organisms are in your body, you are going to be sick. Symptoms. Sometimes we talk about signs and symptoms. These are the things that tell us what we can look for to know somebody is having a disease. So doctors can be able to tell some by reading your temperature, and they will be able to tell you have a fever. You may feel pain, you may feel headache. Sometimes if you touch your skin, you can feel it's warm. That might give you an indication that you're having fever. But of course, to know actually that you are carrying certain diseases, there are some tests that have to be done. Next, we're looking at the mode of transmission. Mode simply means the means of passing on the disease. Transmission, modes of transmission. How is this disease passed from one person to the other, or whichever way they are passed? Vectors, I mentioned earlier on, these are the organisms that bring disease to our foods, to our bodies, to our waters, and so on. And there is what we call the host, the chief host, or the primary host. Host simply means you welcoming somebody, you housing somebody. So if you become a chief host for a disease, it means you're the person that the disease is going to cause sickness in your body. That means they pass through, which is the next term, secondary or intermediary host. They pass through some other organism in some instances before they can reach you. Parasite, probably not a new word. It simply means organisms that either live on your body or they live inside your body to obtain food, and of course they get a free lodging. But in addition to that, while they're getting food and lodging, they cause disease in your body. The next term we want to look at is what they call incubation period. Incubation period. This is simply the time it takes for the disease from the moment the disease enters your body to the time symptoms are begin to show, or the time you begin to feel sick. So sometimes you have the disease and you don't even know because you don't feel anything and nobody sees anything on you. But after a certain period, which we refer to as the incubation period, then the disease begins to manifest itself in you. And the final one is what we refer to as the control. There are other nice terms there, prophylaxis and so on. These are all just to make things very nice. It simply means how do you control disease? How do you prevent it so that you don't get more people having the disease? So disease-causing organisms are carried by a what? This will help me know if you are really following my descriptions here. Disease-causing organisms are carried by is it a protozoan, worm, parasite, or vector? So if you recall, when I explained vectors, we said they are the ones that carry disease-causing organism. Next, the period between infection and manifestation of the symptoms of a disease is known as, I think it was the second to last thing I spoke about. If you choose incubation period, correct. So here we have some pictures of pathogens. Remember what I said? Pathogens are the microorganisms that cause disease. So viruses, bacteria, fungi, protozoa, worms, these are common pathogens. and they are the guys that are responsible for most of our discomfort. Viruses, bacteria, fungi, protozoa, worms. I have a good number of pictures. First of all, you can see a collection of those very tiny ones. So, which of the following is or are pathogens? Is it flies? Is it mosquitoes? Is it cockroaches? Is it bacteria? Think carefully. Pathogen. What did we say? Pathogen. We said these are organisms that cause disease. Does fly cause disease? Does mosquito cause disease? Does cockroach or cockroaches, do they cause disease? What about bacteria? Do they cause disease? So the right answer there should be bacteria. The others, we'll put them under this group, the vectors. Viruses cease to live when they are outside a living cell. Viruses, they cease to live when they are outside a living cell. Is this true or false? What do you think? Okay, I didn't tell you much about viruses, but the answer there is true. Viruses can only survive when they are inside living cells. When you take them outside living cells, they stop living. However, that does not mean if they now have access to other living things, they will, of course, start living again. Let's go. So that's a picture of a bacterium cell. And here we have pictures of different kinds of fungi. Mushroom, I believe, is very popular. And you can see in the ring there, that's what they look like when you look at them in the microscope. We have also more protozoans there. Chlamydomonas is there, amoeba, paramecium, and of course euglena. This is just to show you some samples of protozoans. Let's move on. Worms are also responsible for the diseases that we sometimes get. That's a very sad picture of a boy. You can see worms coming out of the nose and the mouth. And of course, the giant ones are on the right there. You can see tapeworm is there, a roundworm, and so on. Which of the following is not a source of infection? Source of infection. Infection means getting disease, and usually it is done when organisms like flies and cockroaches and so on bring the disease onto you. So which of them is not a source of infection? We have air, water, droplet, and virus. So which of them would you say is not a source? Think of it, virus is what? Virus itself is a pathogen because it causes disease. Air is a means by which the disease can be transmitted. So it's the same with water, and of course droplets are when people sneeze and cough, or even when they talk. You have droplets of saliva coming from their mouth and floating in the air. So we're going to look at types of diseases. Types of diseases. Okay? So first, there's this nice term, epidemiology, which studies the outbreaks of diseases. And next, which is very important for us, it says diseases are either communicable or they are non-communicable. What do we mean? If they are communicable, it means they can be passed from person to person. If they are non-communicable, it means they are not caused by organisms, so they cannot be passed from person to person. So we have to take note of the differences. Again, note that communicable diseases, because they are caused by organisms, so once they can pass on those organisms from a sick person to a healthy person, they'll have communicable diseases. Non-communicable because they are not caused by disease, so they cannot be passed from person to person. So among the communicable diseases, we can break them into two types. So we have one, contagious diseases. That means people need to come into contact with each other for the disease to be passed from person to person. And then you have the infectious type, which is the one that is caused by the organism that causes the disease. Now, the disease must pass through some other organism. Sometimes it doesn't cause disease there, but then when it comes to us, the humans, that's where it shows itself most. So you can see infectious diseases, they are spread by what we call intermediate or secondary hosts. Example could be the insect, it could be water, it could be air. So let's take note of these two. Contagious disease, you can only get them when somebody that is having the disease passes it on to you. Whereas infectious disease, you get them either through the air, breathing the disease, the pathogens that the person breathes out, or insects like mosquito, taking the organism called Plasmodium and then bringing it into your body, or even the water we drink. If you have water that is infected, then you can have infectious diseases. So those are the two types of communicable disease. Let's move on. All right, so what must be there for communicable diseases to occur? It is very important that something has to be there. And what are these things that must be there? There must be a causative agent, okay? It must be an organism that is going to cause the disease. There must be a susceptible host, somebody in which the disease is going to show itself. And of course, there must be a transmission route. Like we said, it could be either by contact or contagious. It could be through the air. It could be through the water and foods we drink if they're infected. So once those three things are available, then the person disease can be communicable. If one of them is absent, it's not possible. Next, they could also be, communicable diseases can be airborne. So first of all, let's just look. We've said, we've looked at the way you can get them. So now we're looking at which means, we have the airborne diseases. That means you get them through the air. People, like I mentioned, people breathing, people coughing, even talking. Some of these diseases can be passed from person to person. We have common cold, measles, whooping cough, poliomyelitis or simply polio, tuberculosis, and meningitis. These are diseases that can be passed through the air. It doesn't mean they cannot be passed through other means as well, but some diseases are limited only to certain means of passing them on. Next, we look at waterborne diseases. Water or foodborne diseases. Okay, they include dysentery, cholera, typhoid fever. So it means we get these ones if the food we are going to eat or the liquids or water we are going to drink are contaminated with the germs, then we have them. You will notice sometimes when people are preparing food, we need to be careful sometimes at large gatherings because sometimes we have many hands on deck. And if the people are not careful in the way they handle the food and they bring in disease, people can be infected. And the final one there, it's insect-borne diseases. All right, like malaria, which is passed on to us by the mosquito. Okay, the mosquito brings the disease, the pathogen that is causing the disease. Yellow fever, the WHO had, fought very tough battle with yellow fever. By a large extent, they've reduced it, but sometimes it pops up a little bit and then disappear again. So these are the ways that diseases can be passed. We have worm infestation. So let me take number 4 right up there. I need this note. This is why I'm leaving them there. Worm infestations. You have a broad band of worms, quite a large number of worms, but I mentioned only roundworm, tapeworm, hookworm, and guinea worm, because these are very common in West Africa particularly. And we also have animal-borne diseases, that is diseases that are passed to us through animals, okay? Rabies is a very popular one there. We get this from dogs. Rabies is actually caused by viruses. So the viruses are passed from dogs onto us humans, and then we can have it there. And the final one is contact. So we have those diseases we get when we come into direct contact with people. Contact diseases. Among these, you have the sexually transmitted diseases, and of course, they include gonorrhea, syphilis, and there are other diseases like athlete's foot, which you can get if a member of the in the house, if a member of the family in the house is having athlete's foot, you're all using the same bathroom, and sometimes you wear each other's slippers and so on. You can easily pick up athlete's foot. Of course, some people are susceptible to it, like people who wear socks and crepe for long periods, and sports people that do a lot of activities and produce large amount of sweat. This encourages the breeding of these organisms. Ringworm is common among children. You know, they play, sometimes they bathe together, they share things. Ringworm, we sometimes see it like little rings on the face or on the skin of children. Leprosy is another one. It damages the digits, the toes and the fingers of people. Scabies, I forgot the local name, somebody told me some time back. This is a bacterial disease that comes out like spots, usually in areas we sweat a lot, you know, in the armpits and the groin. And of course, our big brother that has been overtaken by the new disease, that is the AIDS, HIV/AIDS. These are all contact diseases. So let's look at the next, non-communicable diseases. So now we can put this one aside, and we look at non-communicable diseases. We've explained they're not caused by living organisms. They cannot be treated by antibiotics, and they don't spread from person to person. Quite a lot there. You have asthma, you know, which we see in people as it shows itself as shortness of breath. You know, these people, they want to breathe, they are unable to breathe, and if they don't get help, it can be very fatal. Hypertension, or simply some will call it a heart attack. Like you see in the picture, okay, it's an animation, but it shows what, you know, when the attack comes on people, you know, they have a sudden feeling that something is wrong. It's a disease of the circulatory system. Cancer is a situation wherein the body's defense system or immune system attacks your own very body and then begins to destroy your cells. Kwashiorkor is a nutrition deficiency disease. So when some children are not having the right type of nutrient, then especially protein, when they don't have enough protein or they don't have any protein in their diet, then they can suffer from kwashiorkor. Tetanus is a bacterial disease that we get. It's not commonly associated with rusty nails or metals and so on, but it's actually caused by bacteria. So usually the bacteria is in these metals, and when they pierce or cut your skin, the bacteria gain access to your blood circulatory system, and then they begin to cause some problem for you. Diabetes, we normally associate it, is associated with sugar. It's simply the body's inability to control sugar properly. And when that happens, the result is that either you have too much sugar in your blood or you don't have enough sugar in your blood. Even when the sugar is floating around, the fact is your body is not able to take it and use it. So hence, if it is too much, it's a problem for you. If it is too little, it means you don't have enough for your body to use and give you the energy you need for common activities like talking, breathing, sleeping, and so on. Sickle cell anemia is a disease of the blood cells wherein these blood cells don't have the normal circular shape of the red blood cell. They're usually in the shape of a sickle. Sickle is what our people used to use, and I think some are still using it. It's something like this that they use for harvesting coos and rice and so on. So when the blood cell, the red blood cell, when they have that shape, the patient suffers from sickle cell in the fact that these ones will flow smoothly in the blood cells. But when they are like this, they clump and they block some blood passages, and number two, they don't carry enough oxygen. So patients will suffer a lot from these diseases. All right, so next we just want to look, say one or two things about some diseases if time can permit. Number one is our popular guy, the coronavirus, also known as COVID-19. Of course, nowadays you can see a lot of people wearing masks, hopefully to protect themselves against the disease. Now, coronavirus disease 2019 or COVID-19 is a disease caused by coronavirus. The coronavirus is a common virus that causes what doctors call respiratory tract infection. It can affect your upper respiratory tract, like the sinus, the nose, and the throat. Sinus you have somewhere up in the nose area there, of course the nose and the throat, and of course the lower respiratory tract. That includes the trachea, going down to the lungs, and so on. Most coronaviruses are not dangerous. Common cold is caused by coronavirus. It's not dangerous. We've lived with it for centuries. Influenza is also caused by coronavirus. Some succumb to it, others survive it. But the new one that has come, why we're struggling is because doctors haven't, scientists haven't got a cure for it yet. They've not been able to even know how the virus is moving. The concern a lot of them is having this virus keeps mutating, it keeps changing itself. Next. So how did we come to know about this? There was this outbreak late December 2019 in China. Of course, we have had a lot of stories about this, and the doctors gave it a very fine name. If you look at it, they call it the acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2, or SARS-CoV-2. Simply, they call it COVID-19. Now, the outbreak quickly spread around the world, and it has spread the same way other coronaviruses have been doing, and mainly through person-to-person contact in most instances. And the infection or the way it deals with people ranges from mild and into serious and very serious situation. And if we move on, symptoms of coronavirus, if you've probably had this, one of the first symptoms you will have is fever, and then there will be cough. And what distinguishes its own cough is the fact that you cough and there is no liquid, no phlegm, no this sinus coming out. That yellow thing that comes when we have common cold. With coronavirus, nothing comes out, you're just coughing. And because it targets the cells of the lungs, it destroys them, and so your lungs are no longer able to do their work. And so because they are not able to get oxygen for you, then that's where people have shortness of breath. They can't breathe on their own. And this is where it becomes very critical. So now you need a device or a machine that can bring oxygen in your body. So it can also lead, if we go back a little bit, the disease can lead to other conditions like pneumonia, respiratory failure, septic shock, and death. And they say if you observe any of these symptoms, you should get medical help right away. Next. So is there any cure? No, there's no known cure. So it says prevention is the key. If you look at the picture there, one of the best way to handle it is to make sure you wash your hands as often as possible. Use soap and water. It's one of the simplest and most effective ways of getting rid of coronavirus. Anytime you're able to think about it, sometimes some people even need to set alarm clock for it. Like if you're able to do it 5 to 10 times in a day, it's good. And anytime you accidentally touch, or whether it's deliberate, because sometimes you might touch things that other people have touched, it's very important you wash your hand with soap and water. If you can afford or you're able to get hand sanitizers, they also help you so that you can, anytime you think you might have touched something you should not touch, then you clean your hand. Avoid touching your eyes, and not just your eyes, the nose and the mouth, entry points into the body, you know, areas wherein if this virus comes in contact with those areas, it's able to enter the body. So you avoid touching those things. Stay at home if you feel you're sick, so that you, one, stop spreading the disease, and two, it will help to keep the disease where it is until probably you recover. If you need to sneeze or cough or spit and all these things, you're advised to do so in your elbow, because you normally don't shake that one with people. Although nowadays we do this sideway elbow as a means of greeting. So if I sneeze here and then I'm touching you, it means it can be easily passed that way. But the key point is, for now, there's no known cure. So what we should try to do more of is to stay safe. Today we'll end it here. Next time we meet, we'll look at other diseases, including the communicable and the non-communicable diseases. So I hope you were able to take down some notes, which hopefully you can go through. And next time we meet, I'll be revising some of these things and asking you some questions to know, those of you who have been studying your notes. Thank you. My name is Mr. Qureshi.